Rain tapped gently against the iron gates of the Gates estate, a soft rhythm that blended with the rustling of leaves along the driveway. Inside the warm, expansive mansion, Mrs. Aldridge glanced at the grandfather clock in the foyer. It was 4:18 p.m. "Where is he?" she murmured aloud. Thomas, one of the security staff, adjusted his earpiece. "Should I call Mr. Gates?" Mrs. Aldridge shook her head. "Give him 5 more minutes. You know, Peter likes to walk home. Says it clears his head." Peter Gates, 13 years old and the youngest of Bill Gates's children, was not like his siblings. He didn't like being picked up in town cars or chauffeured from school to home. He preferred the long walk, rain or shine, often stopping to observe frogs, trees, or cracks in the sidewalk as if the world still held mysteries everyone else missed. Then the front gate security panel beeped. On the screen, Peter's soaked face appeared, cheeks flushed from the wind, but he wasn't alone. "I'm home." Peter's voice crackled through the speaker, "and I brought someone for dinner." Mrs. Aldridge frowned. "A friend?" she whispered to herself, reaching to unlock the gate. The front door opened wide and Peter tumbled in, rain dripping from his blue jacket. Behind him stood a boy who looked a year older, maybe 14. His clothes were drenched, his thin jacket torn at one shoulder. Dark bangs clung to his forehead, and his eyes shifted nervously as he clutched a heavy backpack to his chest. "Mrs. Aldridge, this is Jacob. He's having dinner with us," Peter announced cheerfully. The housekeeper smiled warmly but internally froze. The boy was clearly not from Peter's school. His clothes were worn, his shoes duct-taped at the toes, and his eyes held the same guarded look she had seen years ago when she volunteered at shelters. "Hello, Jacob," she said gently. "Why don't we get you both dried off?" "I can wait outside," Jacob said quickly. "Peter just said maybe I could get something to eat." "Nonsense," Peter said, pulling him in by the sleeve. "Dad always says we should help people." Thomas gave Mrs. Aldridge a subtle nod before walking toward the security room. Quietly, he would alert the household staff and notify Mr. Gates's assistant. As they walked across the marbled foyer, Jacob's eyes scanned everything. The curved staircase, the chandelier, the hall lined with large oil paintings and award plaques. "Your house is like a museum," Jacob whispered. Peter grinned. "Wait till you see my room. I've got a slide that goes from my bed to the basement." While the boys disappeared toward the upstairs bathroom, Mrs. Aldridge typed a quick text. "Peter brought home a boy, possibly homeless. No ID, no warning. Please advise." She knocked gently on the bathroom door a few minutes later, carrying a towel and dry clothes. "Jacob, I've left you some dry clothes outside the door. They're Peter's older brothers, but they should fit." "Thank you," came the boy's soft voice. Downstairs, Chef Lorenzo had already begun preparing grilled cheese and soup. Mrs. Aldridge moved quietly into the kitchen. "Has anyone heard from Mr. Gates?" she asked. "He's in a meeting with the foundation board," replied Elena, his assistant, checking her tablet. "Not to be disturbed until 5. Mrs. Aldridge sighed. "Then we'll have to make do until then." 20 minutes later, the boys appeared, dry and warmer. Jacob wore a navy sweater and clean jeans, slightly loose but clean. His own clothes were bundled in his arms, still wet. He clutched them as though someone might try to take them away. "You can toss those in the dryer," Mrs. Aldridge offered. "I'm okay," Jacob replied quickly, clutching his backpack tighter. "Suit yourself." "Are you hungry?" Jacob nodded faintly, his eyes on the sandwich tray. "Help yourself," Peter said, grabbing one for himself. "Chef Lorenzo makes the best food ever." Jacob hesitated, then picked up a sandwich and took a bite, small at first, then a bigger one, then another in rapid succession. "When did you last eat?" Mrs. Aldridge asked quietly. "Yesterday. Library was closed today." "No snacks." Chef Lorenzo raised an eyebrow, then turned to slice more fruit. "How did you two meet?" Mrs. Aldridge asked. "At the library," Peter said, sipping a glass of orange juice. "He was reading about rocket engines. He knows like everything." Jacob smiled faintly. "I just read a lot." Mrs. Aldridge's phone buzzed. It was a text, not from Elena, from Mr. Gates himself. "Tell Peter I'll be home in 20 minutes. Don't let the boy leave." She blinked. Bill Gates never left meetings early, especially not board meetings. "Peter," she said carefully, "your father will be home shortly. He's looking forward to meeting Jacob." Jacob froze mid-bite. He's coming here? Because of me? Peter laughed. He never comes home early. You're special. Maybe I should go, Jacob murmured. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. No way, Peter said. You're staying. The kitchen staff pretended to stay busy, but everyone was glancing toward the clock. Word had spread fast. Peter brought home a stranger, and Mr. Gates was on his way to meet him. Then they heard it. The soft hum of the electric car rolling into the garage. Bill Gates had arrived. The air tightened. The clock ticked loudly. Jacob's fingers dug deeper into the strap of his backpack. The door opened, and there he was. Bill Gates, in his signature sweater and slacks, paused in the doorway. He looked at his son, then at Jacob. Dad, Peter ran up. This is Jacob. He's having dinner with us. Bill put a hand on Peter's shoulder, then stepped forward, addressing the quiet boy holding the damp bundle. Hello, Jacob, he said warmly. Welcome to our home. Hello, Jacob, he said warmly. Welcome to our home. Jacob stood quickly. Sir, I didn't mean to. Peter just said I could have food. I don't want to be a problem. I can leave. No need, Bill interrupted softly. Finish your sandwich. Mrs. Aldridge, can you prepare the blue guest room? And maybe some extra clothes. Mrs. Aldridge blinked. Yes, sir. Of course. As she walked past, she heard Bill Gates ask Jacob, What were you reading at the library? And just like that, the boy who had been alone in the rain was now sitting in the home of one of the world's most powerful men. And something about the way Bill Gates looked at him made her pause. There was a flicker in his eyes. Not confusion, recognition. Something had just begun. Later that afternoon, Jacob found himself sitting cross-legged on the carpet in Peter Gates's room. It looked less like a bedroom, and more like a hybrid between a play, lab and a tech startup. On one wall hung a full whiteboard filled with half-finished equations. Another wall had shelves of books, kits, and even a 3D printer. This is the Mars base, Peter said proudly, pointing to a plastic model of domed buildings. Dad and I started designing it last summer, just for fun. But also maybe not. Jacob gave a half smile. The water system's too small. Peter looked surprised. What? Jacob leaned over the model. You'd need double the filtration and at least a secondary reserve. You can survive without food for weeks. Water? Days. Peter blinked, then grinned. You're totally right. That's awesome. Downstairs, Bill Gates stood at his office window, phone pressed to his ear. His name's Jacob, he said to the man on the other end. No known last name. Around 14. Possibly from Washington State. I need everything you can find. School history. Family, any known relatives, quietly. Bill? Came the voice on the other end. Are you considering guardianship? I'm considering responsibility, Gates said. That boy has been sleeping behind bushes, and he's quoting fluid dynamics to my son over breakfast. Understood. I'll update you in 24 hours. When he hung up, Bill didn't move right away. His eyes drifted to the family photo on his desk, his 3 children smiling beside him. Taken at a tech conference years ago, something about Jacob had stirred a memory. Not a visual one, but deeper, an echo of something he thought long buried. That evening, dinner was quiet. Peter chatted about school. Jacob barely touched his plate. The food looked perfect, grilled salmon, rice, asparagus, but his stomach felt knotted. Jacob? Bill asked gently. You all right? I'm fine. You don't like fish? It's not that. Peter looked at him. You okay? Jacob hesitated. Do you always bring strangers home? Peter blinked. No, you're the first. Jacob turned to Bill. And you? Do you always let strangers stay overnight in your house? There was no accusation in his voice, just confusion. Bill placed his fork down and met his gaze. No, I don't. Jacob's throat tightened. Then why me? The question hung heavy over the table. Even Peter went silent. Bill folded his hands. Because when someone shows up in your life unexpectedly, and they remind you of something you lost, you don't turn away. Not again. Jacob didn't know what that meant, but something in Bill's voice made his chest ache. I can leave, Jacob said suddenly. I didn't ask for this. I don't want to be some kind of... You're not, Bill said firmly. Jacob stood up. You don't even know me. Maybe not, Bill replied, still calm. But I know enough. Mrs. Aldridge gave a gentle smile. Mr. Gates says it's raining too hard for you to go back out. The bed is warm, and no one's rushing you out the door. Jacob looked at the bed like it was something alive, something that might swallow him whole. Too soft, too clean, too not his. But he nodded anyway. Yep. Downstairs, Bill Gates stood in his home office, the rain still tapping softly against the windows. His assistant, Eliza, waited with a file in hand. "We've pulled preliminary searches," she said. "No missing person reports match the boy's face or first name. No digital footprint. No school enrollment in the area in the past 2 years under the name Jacob. No relatives. Not yet. His age narrows the possibilities. If he's not in any system, that means he dropped out, either deliberately or was never registered." Bill nodded slowly. "Widen the search," he said. "Check Seattle's shelter logs, church assistance programs, anywhere he might have turned up without giving a full name." "You think he's important?" Eliza said carefully. "I don't know yet," Bill replied. "But he's smart. And something in the way he speaks. Feels like déjà vu." Yep. Jacob stared up at the ceiling of the blue room. The bed was too soft, the silence too perfect. He missed the crunch of leaves beneath his sleeping bag, the distant sound of buses, even the occasional siren. He pulled his backpack closer and unzipped it, checking its contents like a ritual. A flashlight, a bent library card, a photo of his grandma in a cracked plastic frame, a notebook full of half-finished ideas. Everything he owned, everything that mattered. He placed the photo under the lamp and turned it toward the bed, as if needing her to watch over him even here. In a mansion where he clearly didn't belong, he didn't sleep much that night. Yep. Morning in the Gates household began with quiet movement. Cleaning staff opening drapes, soft music in the kitchen, the faint smell of cinnamon and coffee drifting through the house. Jacob woke to the sound of a knock. "Jacob?" Peter's voice came through the door. "Dad says come down for breakfast." Chef made pancakes. Jacob sat up slowly. The bed was still made neatly under him. He'd laid on top of the comforter all night. He looked around, blinking at the surreal calm of the morning. A stack of fresh clothes sat folded on a chair. New jeans, a clean gray t-shirt, socks without holes. He changed quickly. The clothes felt alien, but warm. He left his old backpack zipped and ready by the door, just in case. In the kitchen, Chef Lorenzo was flipping pancakes while humming to himself. Mrs. Aldridge arranged bowls of fruit with surgical precision. Peter was already seated at the long breakfast island, halfway through his second stack. "Morning," Peter said cheerfully as Jacob entered. Jacob nodded silently and took the seat beside him. Then he noticed the third plate at the end of the island. Bill Gates, wearing a charcoal sweater and wire-rimmed glasses. He sipped from a ceramic mug and tapped on a tablet. "Morning, Jacob," Bill said without looking up. "Hope the bed wasn't too soft." Jacob blinked. It was different. Chef Lorenzo slid a stack of pancakes in front of him, along with a glass of juice. Jacob stared at it. "Are these for me?" "Eat," Peter whispered. "Trust me." He took a tentative bite. Warm, sweet, real. He tried not to devour the whole thing in seconds. Tried. "So," Bill began, setting his tablet aside. "Peter tells me you know a thing or two about rocket engines." Jacob swallowed and wiped syrup off his mouth. "I just read." "What about?" "Everything," Jacob said. "NASA archives, propulsion design, plasma thrusters, mostly books, sometimes PDFs I find on the public library network." Peter cut in. He explained why the Falcon 9's re-entry burn works better when the angle of deceleration is shallow. Like, better than my teacher could. Bill raised an eyebrow. "Do you know what you're describing?" Jacob stared at his plate. "Orbital mechanics. Thrust vectoring, I guess." "You guess?" Bill smiled. "That's pretty advanced for guessing." Jacob shrugged. "I just have time to think." Bill's voice softened. "That's a gift most people don't have. Or don't use." Peter leaned forward. "Dad, can he come to the lab today?" "Just to see?" Bill glanced at Jacob. "Would you like that?" "I don't know," Jacob said quickly. "I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding," Bill said. "But first, may I ask something?" Jacob nodded. "You said you were living in Oak Park. Where exactly?" Jacob hesitated. "Behind the maintenance shed. There's a hollow under the hedge. I used a tarp." Bill leaned back in his chair. You've been on your own. How long? Since Grandma died, Jacob said. 3 months. No family? No one. And the state? I left before they came back. I've heard the stories. Bill paused, his fingers steepled. You know, he said, when Peter told me he brought someone home, I assumed it would be a classmate. I wasn't expecting someone like you. I wasn't expecting any of this, Jacob admitted. Another long pause. Why did you come in, Jacob? Bill asked. Why not stay outside? Jacob stared at the syrup on his plate. Because Peter asked. I was hungry. Bill nodded slowly. Well, he said at last, this is your home tonight. And maybe longer. But I want you to know this isn't charity. I don't believe in pity. I believe in potential. Jacob looked up, confused. I think you're someone worth knowing, Bill said. And I don't think it's an accident you walked into my house. Jacob wasn't sure what to say, but a strange warmth filled his chest. Like something was starting, like something was finally beginning. By the end of the first week, Jacob had stopped checking the front gate every morning. At first, he'd expected someone from Child Services to arrive. Or maybe a relative he'd never heard of. Or worse, a reporter. But none came. Each day began with breakfast at the long oak table, with Peter beside him and Bill Gates seated across. Always dressed simply, always curious. The attention felt strange. Not unwelcome, but undeserved. He still kept his backpack packed in the blue guest room. Just in case. On Sunday morning, Peter pulled him toward the garage. Come on, I haven't shown you the underground lab yet. Jacob hesitated. Your dad said it was private. Peter rolled his eyes. He cleared it. He even said he wants to show you something. The doors to the private lab required a thumbprint and retinal scan. Peter waved him through. The lab was unlike anything Jacob had imagined. It wasn't the size of the machines, it was the silence. The hum of precision, the quiet, invisible activity of a dozen projects that might still be 5 years from public knowledge. This is his real stuff, Peter whispered. The things even Microsoft doesn't know about yet. Jacob stood in front of a transparent interface displaying a floating model of a solar network, interconnected stations in orbit, designed for capturing and redistributing power to ground stations. It's beautiful, he murmured. You should see the prototype drone that folds itself mid-flight, Peter said. Dad showed me once, but it's locked in another room. Jacob's eyes stayed on the model. Why is your dad showing me this? Peter grinned. Because you're smart. That answer didn't satisfy Jacob. Later that night after dinner, Jacob slipped away and walked quietly down the second-floor hallway. He passed the portraits, the awards, the photos of the Gates children at various ages. He stopped outside the study. Voices came from inside. He wasn't proud of what he did next, but something had been gnawing at him. He stepped closer and leaned in. Eliza's voice. We haven't found a birth certificate. But medical records exist from when he was 6. His grandmother was listed as guardian. No father listed. Bill and the mother. Eliza hesitated. Sarah Reeves. Passed away in 2014. No contact with extended family since 2011. Nothing else. Are you sure? Bill asked quietly. DNA confirmation would be the only way, sir. There was a pause. Then proceed, quietly. Jacob backed away, heart pounding. DNA? Was Bill trying to find out who his real parents were? No, that couldn't be it. Unless Bill already suspected something. The next morning, the blue room felt colder. The clothes folded neatly by Mrs. Aldridge felt like costumes. Even Peter's enthusiasm grated on him. He barely ate. You okay? Peter asked, poking at his eggs. Just tired. But that wasn't it. He knew now. Bill was hiding something, and it had something to do with his mother. That afternoon, Peter begged Bill to take them both to the R&D greenhouse. Bill hesitated, then agreed. But as they walked through the transparent corridors lined with experimental crops and renewable designs, Jacob felt disconnected. Even the drone prototypes didn't excite him the same way. Finally, Peter ran ahead to get his tablet from the car, leaving Jacob and Bill alone. Bill looked at him, really looked. You're quiet today. Jacob stared out at the reflection of the greenhouse glass. Am I staying here permanently? Bill blinked. Do you want to? I don't know. You're always welcome. That's not what I asked. Bill didn't answer right away. Then gently, There are things I'm still figuring out. Jacob turned. Like what? There was a flicker in Bill's eyes. Like where you came from. And why I feel like I've seen you before. Jacob's voice was steady. Did you know my mom? Bill didn't flinch. But he didn't answer right away either. She was brilliant, he finally said. You did know her, Jacob whispered. Did she ever tell you about me? Bill nodded once. No, she didn't. The world went still. Jacob took a step back. Why are you helping me? Bill Gates, for the first time since Jacob met him, looked uncertain. Because I should have helped a long time ago. Jacob's hands clenched into fists. Are you saying? Yes, Bill said quietly. I think you're my son. Jacob didn't remember walking back to the house. He didn't remember Peter calling after him. He didn't even remember shutting the door to the blue guest room. He only remembered one thing. Everything in his life had just changed. Again. Jacob didn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling of the blue room, heart-pounding thoughts spiraling. Bill Gates is my father. The sentence looped endlessly in his mind. It explained so much. The way Bill looked at him. The sudden generosity, the private searches. The guarded expression whenever Jacob mentioned his mother. But it also raised 100 more questions. Why didn't he know about me? Why didn't she tell him? Why now? At dawn, Jacob got out of bed and crept to the window. Rain had returned, tapping against the glass like it had the night he arrived. His breath fogged the window. Below, the garden was quiet, the house asleep. He grabbed his backpack. It was still packed, his whole life zipped into a nylon shell. Maybe it was time to leave. Maybe staying had been a mistake. But when he opened the door, Peter was already waiting in the hallway, barefoot holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. I figured you'd be awake, Peter said softly. Jacob sat on the carpet outside the blue room. Peter handed him the cup and leaned against the wall beside him. You know, Peter said after a minute, Dad never makes time for anyone. Not even us sometimes. You're the only person I've seen him cancel meetings for. Jacob didn't answer. Peter continued. He told me last night. About your mom. That there's a chance you're his son. Jacob nodded slowly. I don't know what to do, he whispered. You don't have to know, Peter said. You just have to stay. Figure it out with him, with us. Later that morning, Bill called Jacob into his study. The rain had stopped, but the tension in the air had not. Bill stood behind his desk holding a folded photograph. He handed it to Jacob. It was a picture of a woman with striking eyes. Eyes that looked exactly like Jacob's. She sent this to me in 2010, Bill said. I was too busy. Too caught up in the foundation, the companies. I didn't follow up. You never saw her again? No, Bill said quietly. She stopped writing. I assumed she moved on. I didn't know she was pregnant. Jacob looked down at the photo. His mother was smiling in it, standing in front of a university science fair booth. Her name tag read Sarah Reeves, Advanced Fuel Theory. She was brilliant, Bill said. Braver than I ever gave her credit for. Jacob's voice cracked. Then why didn't she tell you? I don't know, Bill whispered. But I wish she had. They stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Jacob asked, Did you do a DNA test? I did, quietly, from your hairbrush. Jacob didn't answer. I had to know, Bill added. And? You're my son. Jacob looked at him for a long time. Are you going to tell everyone, he asked. Only if you want me to. I don't know what I want, Jacob said. Bill nodded. That's okay. Take your time. That afternoon, Child Protective Services arrived. A woman in a navy blazer sat down with Jacob in the formal sitting room. I'm here to make sure you're safe, she said, and that wherever you're staying is appropriate. Jacob gave her short, careful answers. Yes, I have a bed. Yes, I have meals. Yes, I feel safe. She leaned forward gently. And Mr. Gates? How has he treated you? Jacob thought about it. He's trying, he said at last. Trying? Trying to be someone I can trust. She nodded and took notes. After the interview, she asked to speak with Bill alone. Jacob stepped into the hallway. Peter was waiting there, tense. How'd it go? Peter whispered. I don't know. They heard muffled voices behind the door. The caseworker. Bill's calm tone. The word guardianship. When the door opened again, she gave Jacob a professional smile. You'll stay here for now, she said. But we'll be checking in regularly. And Mr. Gates will need to file paperwork if he intends to become your legal guardian. Jacob nodded. After she left, Bill turned to him. "You still have a choice," he said. "You can stay here. Or with your uncle." "My uncle?" Jacob asked, confused. "I've been searching. You have one, your mother's brother. He lives in Oregon. A mechanic. No children. Does he know about me?" "He does now," Bill said. "He wants to meet you." Jacob's mouth went dry. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want to be the only voice you hear," Bill replied. "I don't want you to stay out of guilt or obligation. I want you to choose." The next morning, a black car pulled into the driveway. A tall man stepped out, in a worn flannel jacket and heavy work boots. His hair was streaked with gray, his eyes piercingly blue. Jacob watched from the window. "Is that him?" he asked. Bill nodded beside him. "James Carter, your mom's brother." Jacob took a deep breath and walked downstairs. The man looked up as Jacob approached. His face softened. "You look just like her," he said. "Your mother." Jacob stared. "Do you remember her?" he asked. "I do," James replied. "She was the smartest person I ever knew." They stood awkwardly for a moment before James extended a hand. "You mind if we talk a little?" Jacob glanced at Bill, then nodded. "Yeah," he said, "okay." The two of them stepped out into the garden as the wind picked up. For the first time in his life, Jacob had more than one place he could go. But he wasn't sure where he truly belonged. Not yet. 3 days after meeting James Carter, Jacob stood on the porch of the Gates estate with his backpack over his shoulder. Bill stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes tired but calm. Peter waited behind the glass door, his face unreadable. "Are you sure?" Bill asked. Jacob nodded. "I think I need to know where I came from before I decide where I'm going." Bill looked out over the circular driveway where James's truck waited. "I understand," he said. "This doesn't change what I feel." Jacob hesitated. "I'm not leaving forever." "I know." They stood in silence for a moment before Jacob stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't awkward or forced. It was quiet, deep, real. And then he stepped down the stairs and walked toward the truck. The drive to Oregon was long. James didn't talk much, but he wasn't cold. They stopped for burgers and shared stories about Jacob's mother, how she'd once built a working FM radio from junkyard parts, how she used to sing loudly when she was nervous. Jacob listened like he was collecting pieces of himself. At the end of the road was a small house with peeling paint and a shed out back that smelled of oil and tools. It was nothing like the Gates mansion, but it felt honest. That night, Jacob slept on a pull-out couch in a room filled with old car manuals and a cat named Diesel curled at his feet. He read one of his mother's old notebooks. James had kept a physics journal filled with equations, ideas and quotes from Carl Sagan, and he cried. For her, for everything she never got to see, and everything he was still trying to become. 2 weeks passed. James taught him how to change a carburetor. Jacob rewired an old fuse box in the garage. They built a routine, quiet but steady. But one night, sitting at the dinner table, James said, "You know, your dad calls every few days. Just asks how you're doing. Doesn't pry." Jacob looked down at his plate. "Do you want to talk to him?" James asked. Jacob nodded. The phone call was short. "Hey," Jacob said. "Hey," Bill replied. They sat in silence for a moment before Jacob said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me go figure this out." "I didn't let you," Bill said gently. "You chose. That's what makes you strong." Jacob smiled. "I think I'm ready to come back. But just for a visit. You're welcome anytime." "I know." 3 months later, the Gates Foundation announced a new youth science initiative. Standing beside Bill at the podium was a 13-year-old boy in a navy blazer, a crisp shirt and mismatched sneakers, Jacob. The crowd didn't know the story. They didn't know about the park bench, the blue guest room, the DNA test, the photo. But they heard the words Jacob spoke. "I used to think no one would ever notice me. But sometimes the right person sees you before you even see yourself. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they don't just open a door, they leave it open, in case you ever want to walk back through." Bill stepped forward and placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. In front of 1,000 cameras, Jacob didn't flinch. He didn't need to, because for the first time in his life, he knew exactly who he was. Not just a lost kid, not just a name on a forgotten school list, but someone who belonged to a future he was going to help build. with both hands.